I'd like to thank all of you for the privilege and opportunity to have served as your board chair this past year and your president the year before. As we move ahead into the upcoming year, I want to congratulate Dr. Lauren Carruth, who is going to be your incoming president. And I would like to continue to support her in all ways possible to move her agenda forward. I would also like to congratulate Dr. Peter Carosone for the great things that he has accomplished in the last year, and confident that the Academy will continue to flourish under new leadership. The details of my report are in the handbook. As I complete my year as your board chair, I want to truly thank the wonderful staff at NJAFP that I've had the pleasure of working with for the past few years. Their expertise, energy, enthusiasm makes what the Academy is today. So I would like all of you to give a big hand to our Academy staff, please. I plan to remain active with the Academy in many ways and help move family medicine forward. I joined the NJAFP leadership many years ago to find a voice for myself, to find a voice for family medicine. And I firmly believe that our Academy does need your voice right now. So I encourage all of you to become active members of this Academy. Come and give your voice to NJAFP. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi, and I'm sure I'm going to extend my thanks for your work through the officerships and, of course, as the chairman of the board this last year. She did a great job. Now we'll hear the report of the outgoing president, Dr. Peter Carosone.
It was a year ago today, almost. It wasn't Father's Day weekend, but a different weekend last year that I stood and told you about my goals for the upcoming year. And there was two major goals. One was to take our archaic bylaws that hadn't been looked at for over 10 years, even had a constitution and bylaws, and try to reframe that. Lauren Carruth was very instrumental in coming up to me and volunteering to be part of that workforce, and has led that ad hoc committee to come up with a document that we're going to be voting on today. And I want to thank her very much for stepping up. The second goal was to put together a loan forgiveness ad hoc committee. What I had seen prior to this was an idea that came from Sarah Leonard, I believe, who complained as a resident that we are having problems keeping our physicians in New Jersey because of the overwhelming debt coming out of school. And they put together a nice little video that had a big emotional impact on myself. But I thought we needed to take it to another step. We needed to use that and refine it and get it to legislators, get it to insurers, get it to other people like the media to be able to make change in this state. Maria Seminello headed up that committee, and I wanted to thank her very much. She knocked it out of the park. And Claudine Leon was a keystone to this committee, and without her, none of this would have been done. In fact, all the accomplishments of this year, which I think we did a really good job, was not as much from me, but as I had a very supportive medical executive committee that was very engaged and excellent, and I hope for Lauren she has the same luck that I have having the people around me support me. Michael Cascarino had prior to my presidency, had a committee that he continued to move forward in terms of following up on membership survey, that we try to identify people that might have interest in the academy and try to build our academy through education or even being members eventually on the board. And he's been very helpful. I thank him for doing a very good job on that committee that I think will continue in the future. I also stated in my initial address last year was that just those two issues were not by themselves. I was going to see what was happening through the year, and we were going to be a flexible unit. And as issues came across through national and through the state, that we would look at those types of things and try to react to that. And one of the early things I ran into in FMX in 2017 in some of my meetings was what was going on in other states in terms of giving a percentage of the dollar to primary care and an investment of primary care in different states. Oregon had just developed a law that devoted over time 12% of the healthcare dollar going to primary care. And there was a number of other states that had interest in doing that. Prior to this, Rhode Island, through a different mechanism, because they have a commissioner of health, had put laws in place to get 10.5% of the healthcare dollar to primary care. This intrigued me greatly to the point of bringing Michael Fine, who was responsible in part for Rhode Island, to some of our meetings. We were looking at model legislation that actually came out of New England, but more recently the Aafp has put together some model legislation. So this interest is not going to stop as I step down from presidency and hand the baton to Lauren. I want to continue on that in my board chair role. I think that's a heavy lift, but I think it's really important to do the one thing that when I walked on the board was the biggest problem. When I walked on the board, the talk was New Jersey is a desert, a primary care desert. And the reason it's a primary care desert, as I think we all know, is it comes down to financial reimbursement, be it through loan forgiveness, people aren't staying, or be it through how poorly we're paid compared to other states. So if we're able to work on the loan forgiveness and do something about that, and if we're able to get a percentage of the healthcare dollar up, I think we've made huge inroads in terms of changing the desert and maybe starting a little bit of a lawn in this state. I'd actually like to show the video. Ray, can we put up the video that was put together by the Loan Forgiveness Task Force?
My student loans are $550,000.
$469,000 and $513.
$410,000.
Whoops. There's more than that. Some of you have seen the beginnings. This has been clipped down from what we saw to previous to a shorter version. And the cool thing on this is, as time passed, we saw all these physicians saying, I can't afford to be here, actually leave the state. And it puts up to the places where they went to, which has a very big impact. We took this video to, I took it down to Washington where we were doing advocacy. We showed it to our different legislators. We took it to Horizon, Blue Cross Blue Shield, who were very moved by it, impressed by it. I was hoping at this conference to give you some great news of what this turned into in terms of we actually have done something, not just talked about it. Unfortunately, it's premature for me to break that news. It should be happening over the next few months. But this video and our advocacy in different ways will do something for loan forgiveness in the state beyond what we have right now. Is this still loading? But besides the video piece that is being sent, there's a lot of tabs underneath. So it's not just a video of students say this is how much money I owe, and I went to Texas, it goes into a number of tabs as to why there's a problem, and more importantly, solutions to the problem, as well as a pitch for the value of primary care to legislators that don't seem to always understand what we bring to the table to improve quality in a state as well as diminish cost. While that's still loading, I'm going to talk on another topic, and that is, let's ready, go ahead.
My student loans are $550,000.
$469,513.
$410,000.
New Jersey, and I owe $490,000.
I owe $350,000.
I have $400,000+ in student loan debt.
$210,000 in debt from a state school, and I went to undergrad for free.
I've accrued $60,000 since being in residency.
Almost $300,000 in debt, and this is after paying for 6 years.
Unfortunately, the fact that my whole family's in New Jersey, I grew up in New Jersey, that would be my #1 choice. But I do have to think about my loan amounts.
I'm still living with my in-laws, my wife and kids, but it's tight.
If I wasn't married to someone in New Jersey and didn't have some family here, it would have probably been on the first flight out.
Born in New Jersey, raised in New Jersey, and I want to stay in New Jersey, but unfortunately it feels like New Jersey doesn't want me to stay in New Jersey.
Please don't chase me out of this state. I'm leaving now to go somewhere in the Midwest that will pay me 4 times what you can pay me. That's not right.
I would love to see New Jersey help its own.
Now that's just the lead-off video. I'd like everybody to eventually go on the website and look. There's a number of tabs below that, maybe you can show it here, that go into the value statement and solutions to this problem. And that's just as important, besides whining about we have all these loans, is we actually did a lot of into why they are leaving, why primary care, what New Jersey can do, doctor stories and solutions to this problem. In addition, as things came up through the year, we identified toward the end of the year issues that Mary Capignola brought to the board on where we may not be doing as good a job on our financial or our fiduciary responsibility. And I put together in the last month a task force, an ad hoc task force for finances that Mary is going to be part of. And we're going to be re-looking at how we do our finances. It's long overdue. I think we need to have a good financial policy, possibly modeling after Aafp, as well as good communication and better understanding of our own finances. So this is something that's going to, a new committee that's going to move forth into next year to make sure we're doing a good job for all of you in taking care of the board's finances. I wanted to thank Aditi, who's been like the nicest person to me the whole year. She's not going to be at the gala tonight, so I wanted to give her today a gavel for her hard work this past year. I wanted to thank the New Jersey staff for the New Jersey Academy staff for being so supportive of the agenda that I put together and helping me through. Ray, Teresa, Candida, and all the members of the staff that I can't even go through. And Lauren, I wanted to make sure you know that I've gotten to know you a little bit more toward the end of this year, that I'm going to be there for anything you need. And I'm very, very confident I'm passing the torch to someone very capable, very smart, and we'll do the best for our academy. Right before I started as presidency, I had a prominent family doctor come up to me and say, a little sardonically, do you really think you're going to be able to do anything? Mike Delisi's not here, but I'll mention his name. Not a surprise. And I kind of stumbled, so well, I have this agenda for bylaws and everything, but he made me think a little bit, is this academy really worth it? Are we really doing something in these meetings and with all the pomp and circumstance of our gala? And I can honestly say at the end of this year, we are. I think that this year certainly achieved a number of things, goals that we've gone through. And maybe we didn't cure the Ebola virus or do any huge thing, but we did move things an inch. And if every year we move the academy an inch, pretty soon we'll have gone a mile. And I feel very happy that we've been able to do this inch this year, and I look forward to the future inches we move forward for our academy. Thank you very much for letting me serve you this year.
Okay, we will now have the report of the treasurer, and I would like Dr. Cascarino to come up to the podium to give his report. And if there's any questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them.
Screen here to read from, or am I just, or I can just wing it? Well, I can make something up.
We're doing great.
Oh, all right. Well, that's what I've got. I could have gone through that. Well, if everybody wants to review the report of the treasurer, sure. Summarizing it. You can see that revenue-wise, we didn't do quite as well this year as we did last year, and some of that is just a hitch in how we do our accounting. We got, a little less from pharma, well, significantly less over the past year than we had the year before, and we had expenses that we had projects that monies that had come in previous years were meant for, were spent on this year, and income from pharma didn't match last year or this year what we had gotten last year. And significantly, the academy's monies are flowing in a little bit of a different way. In the past, most of our money came from membership dues and pharma grants. Over the past few years, though, the Academy has become more of a consulting organization to other healthcare firms, such as the Delaware Academy. We now manage their academy. We've partnered with various groups, such as the Alidate ACO, to provide tutoring to their physicians. So we've got a little bit of a different financial model this year than we did in years past. Anyway, as Peter had alluded to, the board does need to be a little more understanding. We need to have a better understanding about how money's flowing through the AAFP or the NJAFP. We were solvent, and money is not going places that it shouldn't be going. But we're not the simple organization we were 20 years ago. where, you know, membership dues and some pharma grants represented, you know, the bulk of the money coming into the organization. That's just not the case anymore. So having said all that, are there any questions? No? All right. So I think I'm finished.
You got a long way to go on the chairs and everything here, so you're not finished. So we're going to deviate a little bit, although it is in the current agenda. We thought it was very important with the change in bylaws that Peter alluded to, that we go through that right now. It may take a long time. It may take a short time. It's the will of the House. Before we do that, has anybody else arrived that has a voting privilege or right at the House? Could you stand up and let us know who you are? Okay. Welcome. Oh, I apologize. Okay, perfect. Hey. Huh. Okay, a small snafu. I apologize. Yes, sir. Yes. You could, sure, sure, you know. Vote twice and often. Okay, so I'm going to call to the podium now Lauren Carruth to give the report of the Bylaws Task Force.
Thank you. So originally, we wanted to start looking into actually maybe changing governance and looking at what we're currently doing and what we might be able to do better. And when we started looking at it, we realized we hadn't updated this in 10 years, and some things were completely out of date. The Aafp bylaws say that, and I have it here, that when the NJAFP is silent, the Aafp bylaws govern, and there were certain situations where maybe they weren't meshing completely. So we took a step back and we decided, let's just update our bylaws to be consistent with what we're doing. There's definitely things that we want to change, but the goal was to at least bring us up to date with where we are. There was redundancy in the Constitution and bylaws, and when we looked at it, we realized the Aafp doesn't have a Constitution. So anything that was in the Constitution that was not in the bylaws that we felt was relevant got moved into bylaws. Let's see, and I talked about that. And the goal is initially to streamline the bylaws and remove irrelevant or conflicting language, and further should reflect the realities of the way the NJAFP has conducted affairs in the recent past. We've made changes with new physicians, the growth in the number of medical schools in the state that I do think still needs to be addressed. So you should have the updated bylaws. You should have two, one where it had the original with the changes, and then the final.
All right, so Ray, we're going to get that up on the screen, the changes, and sure, so everybody can look at it, and because I believe we have to vote on that. I will defer to Lauren as to which one she feels is more appropriate in this setting. All righty. So I guess I'll have Lauren read the changes also from what they are, and then we will take questions, comments, concerns from the floor, and we'll do them one at a time. Do you know how many offhand there are? Oh. Got to twist that bottom thing there. You got to...
There's a few. Can you hear me?
It's on? Okay.
No. Can you hear me if I talk really loud?
Well...
Closer to my mouth? It's still not.
No, she's on it. Possibly.
So the entire Constitution was struck out. So everything is the first 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Okay. Yep.
There we go.
So the Constitution was struck out, so everything on the first 4 pages is gone. The articles, basically the first part of Article 1 is the same, the section, the mission, the organization, having stock, the membership. The old Chapter 2, we changed handling of the dues to be consistent with the AAFP. The officers were not changed. We did include the new physician, and we had the 2-year, under Section 2, there's a 2-year requirement to be involved, and that's not applicable to the new physician resident or student. There's some in Section 3 changes about the voting part, acknowledgement of the voting past presidents in terms of voting and non-voting members. We removed Board of Trustees to Board of Directors in the next article. There was changes done at Article 5, annual meeting. The change was taken from the Aafp bylaws. Some of this was just wordsmithing. One of the things that was there that we did not change in the article, House of Delegates 6, that there's 2 delegates with vote for the student interest groups of each accredited medical school in New Jersey. At the time there were 2. Now there are significantly more, so that's something that we should look at in the future. Under qualifications, we removed the election following adoption of the Constitution and bylaws about the delegates and the elections there. Section 1, we just cropped a little bit the president on the annual basis seat committees. We just took out the different types of committees because I don't think that really needs to be there. So I think that's most of the major. If anyone has any questions or requesting clarification on something that they've seen?
Mary, microphone's in the middle of the...
I haven't finished reading yet, but what are the procedures for changing of the bylaws, and have we followed those completely as far as notice to members and as far as what we're doing now?
Yes. Just move it. Under Article 9, towards at the end, under amendments, we have the bylaws may be amended at any time at any annual meeting by 2/3 vote of the members. We did submit it to the secretary in writing. We did have a bylaws committee who shall submit an opinion by the next subsequent meeting of the House of Delegates, which is here, and we did publish it in multiple official publications a few months ago. So yes.
Specifically, it was in the last issue. Hello, the voice of God. The last issue of Perspectives and in the previous 2 e-newsletters.
Any other questions, concerns, additions? I see Dr. Feistel making his way to the microphone.
The the issue about the student interest groups, before we address that going forward, I think there's a mechanism that you should put in place about looking at how much attendance those students have had at board meetings and the like, because as we expand it, are you going to expand it or are we going to make it worthwhile? All right. Same thing with the resident interest groups too.
Thank you.
It's a great comment. Okay, so we're ready to vote, I guess. Anybody else have any concerns, comments, additions, wordsmithing? Okay, so all those in favor of the amendments to the bylaws and merging the Constitution with the bylaws, raise your hand. All those against? Anyone abstaining? Great, it passes. Very good. Great job, Lauren, to you and your committee. Okay, moving right along, we're going to do the report of the AAFP delegate. Mary?
I was hoping we could temporize until Arnie's here, but I don't think Arnie came in yet, did he? I know he's on his way, but in any case, the other delegates, you want to join me, Sal and Terry?
Would the alternate delegates please stand behind Mary for support? You guys really
thought we should involve everybody.
Come on.
In any case, I'm just trying to pull this up here. So you have a nice report that we did in the handout, and I'm just scrolling to this here. Basically, what it did say was that we had a successful meeting in San Antonio last, I guess it was October. And we were consistent with our previous years. We had the person who came to our meeting as the AAFP representative tended to be the one who wins the election for president-elect of the AAFP. So we were very happy now to have Dr. Cullen here today again. And I'll have to say I've come across some of the other officers of the AAFP in the past month or so, and they kind of keep ribbing me like, well, John's back again now, so why didn't we have other trustees here so we could pick the next president? But in any case, we're very happy to have Dr. Cullen here today. And then some of the other elections were noted too, and our current speaker, Alan Schwartzstein, was previously a New Jersey person, and Dr. Strassener, one of the new trustees, has kind of been an honorary New Jersey delegate at our annual meetings too. So we had 3 resolutions that we brought to the AAFP Congress, and people who may not have been there before should understand that when a resolution comes from us to the AAFP, as soon as it's filed with the AAFP, then that becomes the property of the AAFP House. So sometimes things are reworded or amended, and so we did have that happen with one of our resolutions. And I'm not sure why I'm not, here we go, okay. So we had one adopted as we wrote it, I believe. The one about laboratory, it was amended a little, but the one about laboratory data. Resolved that the American Academy of Family Physicians supports seamless exchange of laboratory data between laboratory and any member of the care team when requested. The data should be shared through the practice's usual preferred method of receiving results at no further cost to the practice. And so this was adopted by the AAFP, and we were happy to see just recently the AAFP sent a notice to the 2 major commercial labs in the country, Quest and LabCorp, talking about this resolution and how they would like procedures to be changed. I know a number of us had questions next as to how we could further affect change in our state level because of this. So perhaps Dr. Cullen can address that when he speaks to us later. The next resolution was number 304, and that was referred to the Committee on Practice Enhancement and then ultimately referred to the Board of Directors. And this one was about limiting additional metrics to reduce administrative burdens. It was a fairly complex topic, and I think that's why it was referred, but fortunately the committee to which it was referred was chaired by our own Bob Itis at the AAFP, and so there have been, there was a, and I have it with me if anybody's interested, but there was a policy statement that came from the AAFP as a result of this, which is how to reduce administrative burdens, and so addresses a number of the issues there. And so we can talk about that if people have questions. And then the last one was Resolution 507, which was regarding the 3 midnight rule for, from Medicare. And that's been a topic of ongoing discussion among family physicians and as well as many physicians around the country for a number of years. This one did have a substitute resolve that came out of it at AAFP. And the resolve was that the AAFP advocate for the elimination of the 3-day rule in cases where a patient requires discharge to subacute or skilled nursing care but does not require additional hospitalization. And again, I'm not sure at the current state, except that the current AAFP lobbying group is still working with Congress and the appropriate representatives at the CMS to work for change on this. And again, it's not just our issue, it's many different physician organizations, including the AMA, have many initiatives on this area. So hopefully this will change at some point in the future. So our next meeting is in New Orleans, October 13th to 17th, and hope we'll see you all there. And thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
Did the alternate delegates have something to add?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Terry Schlimm, I'm alternate delegate. I just want to thank Mary and Arnie for all the work that they do at the Congress of Delegates. They've done an amazing job representing us. And also, for those people who are new, when it comes to resolutions to the Congress of Delegates, you're going to notice a lot of wordsmithing and tightening up of some of those resolutions, perhaps. We've done a great job over the past couple of years at doing this better, because it's a very tricky arrangement when you're presenting these at the Congress of Delegates, and it has to be done just right. And I think with Mary's experience and Arnie's experience, they've helped us tighten these up and make them much more acceptable to the AAFP. And so it's tricky, but when you go about doing these things, I mean, I used to think, gee, you just do this resolution and then it goes to the AAFP and what happens there? It is very, very complex. I don't know how many resolutions there are, but there are, I don't know, thousands probably. And anyway, so it's a complex thing, and I hope people don't get disappointed when they find out how some of these things were resolved ultimately. But anyway, you are very well represented, and I just wanted to thank Mary and Arnie for their hard work.
Thanks again. Next on our agenda, I have the pleasure and the privilege of, again, introducing Dr. John Cullen, current president-elect of the AAFP. And it is clearly true that all roads to the presidency lead through the NJAFP. In fact, another little tidbit that some of you know is that everyone who has come here during an election year running for governor has also won. So I don't know what is special about the House here, but that certainly is another little tidbit going on that. So I'm going to read John's bio. I read it last year, but it's very impressive, so it's certainly worth reading again. John Cullen, MD, fellow of the American Academy of Family Practice or Family Physicians, is a family physician in Valdez, Alaska, currently president-elect of the American Academy of Family Physicians Board of Directors. The AAFP represents 131,400 physicians and medical students nationwide. As AAFP president-elect, Dr. Cullen advocates on behalf of family physicians and patients nationwide to inspire positive change in the U.S. healthcare system, and we expect to hear a lot about that in his address. Dr. Cullen has practiced the full scope of family medicine in a rural community of 4,000 people in Alaska for the past 21 years. Dr. Cullen works in a small group practice and is Director of Emergency Services at Providence Valdez Medical Center. He's been actively involved in residency and medical student teaching for more than 18 years, providing comprehensive training in rural health care. He's an associate clinical professor at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. From 2007 to 2013, Dr. Cullen served on the Alaska State Medical Board. During this time, he also served on the National Advisory Committee on Rural Health and Human Services for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. He has visited several states to evaluate their rural health care systems and critical access hospitals. A member of the AAFP since 1994, Dr. Cullen has served on numerous commissions and committees, including the Committee on Awards, Government and Advocacy, the Commission on Chapter Affairs, and Member Services. Prior to his election to the board, he served as both delegate and alternate delegate to the AAFP Congress of Delegates. Dr. Cullen has also served on the AAFP's Working Group on Rural Health and the AAFP's Task Force on Emergency Medicine. He's the co-author of the AAFP's position paper on emergency medicine entitled Critical Challenges for Family Medicine, Delivering Emergency Medical Care and Equipping Family Physicians for the 21st Century. At the state level, Dr. Cullen's an active member of the Alaska Academy of Family Physicians. He has held numerous leadership positions, including president and president-elect. Throughout his career, Dr. Cullen has received several awards. In 2010, he was a finalist for the AAFP's Family Physician of the Year Award, and he received the Alaska AFP's Family Physician of the Year Award in 2008. Finally, Dr. Cullen earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Molecular and Cell Biology from the University of California, San Diego. He earned his medical degree from the University of Arizona College of Medicine in Tucson. Dr. Cullen completed his residency at the Stanislaus Family Medicine Residency Program in Modesto, California in 1994. Dr. Cullen is board certified by the American Board of Family Medicine. And I'd like to welcome to the podium for his address and to give us some updates on the AFP happenings, Dr. Cullen.
Good morning. It's really an honor to be back here, and I have to say that for this last year, I've really been thinking about what you guys are going through here in New Jersey, and what I've told the board is that if we can fix New Jersey, we fix the country. Because I think that there are some things, and I mentioned this last night, I think that unfortunately, family medicine has not been really benefit as much by reimbursement as it should be, and I think that has an impact, and we're seeing that across the country where states are really trying to improve the amount of money being spent on primary care. And if you look at the United States compared to other countries, especially other industrialized countries that spend a lot less on their health care than we do, a big part of that is that they spend a lot more on primary care. So I'd love to tell you that it's just flat water and smooth sailing. This is where I live, by the way. That's Valdez is right there, and but it's not quite that way. But we've had some successes. So this is Lisa Murkowski, who was one of the 3 votes that kept the ACA, and it was really gratifying because I spent a lot of time with her over the last year before the vote, and she not only voted to support the ACA, but the talking points that she used were the academies. And so this is one of those times where that was a real success, and the advocacy really does make a difference. And one of the things that really is important is to have relationships with your senators and your representatives, so that, and you just never know when one of those relationships is going to bear fruit. And so this was one of those. And it was interesting because we actually had a conversation in the airport. One of the advantages of me traveling so much this last year is that I get to spend a lot of times in airports, and I keep running into various important people there. And Lisa Murkowski and I talked right before she went to give her vote actually held the plane for her, which was pretty funny. I didn't realize that that's what they were doing, but we ended up talking for about 10 minutes after boarding. And then she went and voted. So unfortunately, this is a little bit more like what it's like. So this is also Valdez. So this is 100-mile-an-hour winds and 0-degree temperatures. And it's just a very interesting environment that we're all going to be working in. There are some real positives. So this was we have a wellness conference. Did anybody hear about this last one? Did anybody go to it? So we had our last one in Florida. We expected about 200 people. It was the first wellness conference that we've put on. It was close to 500 people that showed up. It was funny because they had yoga at 6 o'clock in the morning. They figured that 30 people would show up. 150 people showed up for that. And so it was much bigger than we were anticipating. We're going to do it again in June in Phoenix, and I would really recommend it. The support that we got from this was just incredible, and this was just talking about ways to stay focused and engaged with your patients and on resiliency. I showed this slide last time, and this still holds, which is that we're still looking at an increase in healthcare costs in this country, and this is something that we have to turn around. There's some urgency here because what it looks like, and the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office actually agrees with this, that by 2025 is when half of the average income will be going into healthcare. And somewhere between that and 2030, when the average income is going into healthcare, things are going to fall apart. And so we have to bring the cost down in our country. There's just no way around it. And I think I showed this slide as well. This is the growth of administration, and this is the last slide was in 2010, and I think it's much worse now. So if it feels like you have administrators looking over your shoulder all the time, you are, because the green line at the very bottom is the number of physicians, and then the red is the number of administrators, and so that's actually a huge part of why our healthcare system is so expensive. So there was a really good article that came out in JAMA in March, and it looked at why our healthcare system is so expensive. And right now, our healthcare system, we're spending about 18.5% to 19% of our GDP on healthcare, which is twice as much as any other country. I think Switzerland is around 11.5% at this point. They're number 2. Most countries are in the 9% range. And so this study looked at why that is. Why is it that our healthcare system is so expensive? And it's not utilization. So the whole idea with doing prior authorizations is to reduce our utilization of healthcare services and our patients' utilization of healthcare services to bring down costs. But the reality is that we're actually 3 from the bottom in terms of utilization. We do not use as many healthcare services as a general rule as other countries. And so the whole idea behind prior authorizations as a way to save money is false. Where our costs come from is the administration, because we're spending anywhere between 4 and 8 times more than any other country on administrative costs. And a few high-volume, high-cost procedures, and that's the knee replacements, hip replacements, cardiac catheterizations. But outside of that, our healthcare costs are, really a match up with other countries. One thing, though, is that we do spend twice as much on primary care physicians than most other countries. So in Canada, for example, the family physicians only receive about half of our overall income. On the other hand, they aren't dealing with a lot of the pressures that we do, and they don't have the student loans. And student loans are a huge part of our underlying costs that are really not taken into account when we look at healthcare costs in this country. So is everybody set up with macro? I don't have to cover that at this point, right? Okay. So what are we going to do about it? And I think that's going to be the big question. And like I said, there's some urgency because if we continue at our current rate, this is just an unsustainable system. And as an academy, we're looking at ways of paying physicians different. And so the APC-APM is an alternative payment model. So nobody really wants to be in the MIPS program, right? The other name for the MIPS program is the Hunger Games. And so we don't want to be there. For family medicine, MIPS is really not something that is very useful. For a lot of family physicians, we don't even qualify because they changed it so that you have to see a lot of Medicare patients in order to qualify. And for example, our practice does not qualify for MIPS over the next year. That's good because we aren't going to be subject to any negative impact, but that's bad because we're not going to receive any positive impact, which is for family. Hopefully, what was the intent was for family physicians to get paid more under MIPS than previous. But the way they've changed it, we really want to be in an alternative payment model as soon as possible. And so, there's a lot of people who are involved in CPC Plus, and I've been talking to people just around here just recently, and it sounds like your experience in New Jersey is not as good as experiences in other places. I have to tell you that in talking with CPC Plus programs in Nevada and Montana, and even Rhode Island, their experience has been fairly positive. But I think that part of that is that they are also getting paid a little bit more, and I think that makes a difference. Rhode Island has a mandatory spend that's actually up to 13%. That is that 13% of their health care has to be spent on primary care at this point. So it's been going up by 0.5% per year ever since they started the program at 10.5%. And it's interesting is that really does seem to make a huge difference. If you look at Rhode Island compared to Massachusetts, Delaware, other states in that proximity, their healthcare, the rate of rise of their healthcare expenditure has only gone up by 0.5%. At the same time, Massachusetts has gone up by almost 5%. They've had much better, they retain their residents. It's a much higher percentage of retained residents compared to states in that area. There's just a lot of measures where they're doing better. And so spending more on primary care really does make a difference. The data we have from Oregon is that for every dollar spent on primary care, you save $13 on health care overall. And so this is going to be a big push. But I was going to talk a little bit about the APC-APM, and that's our advanced practice model for APM. And it's basically based on the CPC Plus. There's basically 4 buckets where you get a per member per month. You still have some risk for service, you still have some fee for service. There's coordination across the neighborhood. There's basically 4 buckets that money goes into that really describes what we practice. There's 6 measures, quality measures. They're ones that we created. This program has gone through PTAC. We're waiting on the signature from the head of Health and Human Services, and then it'll be a fairly large model. This is something that the plan is that anybody can get into. There's sort of it's just a blueprint for creating it, and as an independent practice, even as a rural practice or an inner city underserved, you could join the APC-APM, and that's our plan. This doesn't really address what the underlying payment mechanism is, but just really how we get paid, and we think that this is a way that really addresses all the things that we do. And so that's our practice. So we have 4 physicians covering about this area the size of Ohio. So Alaska is really, really big. And I realize that being in private practice right now is difficult, and I salute all of you that are continuing to do it. And it is kind of an uphill slog, and sometimes it's really uphill. But we are trying to do some things to help out independent practices. We worry a lot about the amalgamation, and development of these large hospital systems. Because what we found across the country is that when that happens, the costs of healthcare really go up, and the physicians who are involved in those systems actually just do not do as well. So it's important to have continued independent practices. There was somebody from Aledade here last night, and we are partnering with Aledade as well as the Texas Medical Association, the Florida Medical Association, and the California Medical Association to create something called the Partnership Empowerment and Physician-Led Care. This is an advocacy body that's designed specifically to support independent practices. The other one, and like I said, I've been really thinking about New Jersey for this last year, and so every time we have some new proposals, I think about it within the lens of what would work here, as near as I can tell from my conversations with you all. And there's a group out of North Carolina called the Community Care Physicians Network. They're trying to set up a national independent physicians network. And that's something that you may want to look into. Conrad Flick is the one who's involved in that. And this would be almost like a co-op. So it's a little bit different than Aledade in that Aledade is a for-profit ACO. And this is more of an independent network that still has the computing power and other things to make it so you can survive in private practice. And they're already reaching out. They hopefully will be starting something in Texas soon. And the Academy has said if they can come up with 2 states that they are successful in, that we're going to support this as a national project. And so it's something you may want to look into. Texas is interesting because they have ACOs there that really are using the antitrust legislation component of the ACO system to their advantage. And Lloyd Van Winkle is the head of one where they're negotiating with insurance companies for higher rates for a decreased administrative burden based on the numbers they have within their ACO. Because that is one of the other functions of an ACO, is that if you're in an ACO, you are not subject to the antitrust legislation. And it almost acts like a physician union. So just something to think about in your deliberations. And then the mandatory primary care spend. And I guess that would be, if I could have an ask of you, I think that would be what it would be, is to pursue this. Because it is, I think that is one of the areas, one of the reasons why our country is so top-heavy in terms of specialists is because we just spend way too much on specialist care. And if we can spend more on primary care, that's going to cut the cost of the system overall. And I had somebody from California describe it like the percent spent on primary care should be considered like hemoglobin. And if you had a hemoglobin of 4 or 5, you'd be wanting to intervene immediately. Really, you need a primary care spend of somewhere around 13 to 15%. And if you had that, then you would be able to cut the cost dramatically in the system overall. And I think that the legislators need to know this, that for every dollar you spend on primary care, you save $13 overall. And that we can do a lot to reduce the costs of the healthcare system, and we have to, because otherwise the system is just going to end up falling apart. And our specialists don't necessarily, our specialist colleagues may not want to hear that, because that means that we have to take some of the money away from them. But that's, I think, what needs to happen. We have the patient-centered medical home, and that was something that we designed, and was with the best of intentions. And it was almost like we were designing a really great cart, and we figured that if we design this really great cart, that somebody will bring along a horse to attach to it. And the horse never materialized. And I think that that's where things have gone awry, is that we have this beautiful, it's not even a cart, it's a coach. I mean, it's like a stagecoach, but they gave us a donkey to harness to it. And so if this is going to work, then we really do need to have a better payment mechanism for primary care and more of it. Because really what's happened is that this primary care is being starved. What is the percent primary care spend in New Jersey? 5%. 5% is typical across the country.
About 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
But the devil's in the details, right?
Finest primary care is the thing. Is it like people practicing primary care? Because a whole bunch of specialists are listed as primary care under a lot of insurances. So that is where the problem may lie. Yeah.
So it is important how you define it. And so what Oregon did is Oregon, their first year, they passed legislation to look at what the percent primary care spend was, and theirs was 5%. They then set it up so that it was mandatory 12% primary care spend. And all of a sudden, they were spending not 5%, but 10%. So defining what primary care is as you go into this process is really, really important. California is doing this too. So California and Vermont are the two next states that are starting in this process, both of which have legislation that looks like it's probably going to pass. And so, so at that point, we should be able to get some good data about what this does. And it would be nice to see other states kind of following suit. And it's, like I said, I think that it is something that needs to happen. All right, so ABFM. So I was very honored to be chairing the task force on board certification. And we had our task force was made up of physicians across the country. I don't think there was anybody from New Jersey. But it was all different practice settings and styles, everything from independent to academic. We came up with a list of five recommendations. The first one is that board certification should not be used as a sole criteria for either state licensure or hospital privileges. The second was that we created a blueprint for how to evaluate certifying bodies, and that is to look at things like transparency, whether family medicine had a significant voice in the deliberations of the board, because there are other boards starting to creep up besides the American Board of Medical Specialties. And besides that, we were actually telling the ABFM what it was that we wanted to see in a certifying body. The third recommendation was that if we did not feel that the ABFM was listening to what we had to say, that we would actually create our own certifying body. And that's something that we are looking into. So we're starting the initial stages of what that would look like. Fourth recommendation is that we're going to provide other opportunities for physicians to tell the ABFM of what they thought about the process of certification. So board certification really should be a voluntary process. It should be one that we control. But that's the whole idea behind certification, is that it is it's an autonomous process where we look at our own quality. And so it's been kind of frustrating because the ABFM at times feels like we feel like they're not listening to what we're saying. And it actually worked out very well because ABMS created a vision for the future commission where they look at what board certification is going to look like over the next 10 years. And as part of that, they had a survey which was not really advertised to look at what physicians thought of the process of certification. They only had 1,000 responses. We put it out there to our membership and we've had over 20,000 people put in, and unfortunately the survey is closed, or I would give you that information so you could do it as well. But of that 20,000, a significant proportion were family physicians who were writing in to explain how they felt about certification. And then the fifth is that we're going to continue to work very closely. But the whole process of board certification needs to change. It's something that I think I hear more about that than anything else when I'm traveling around the country. How do you guys feel about it currently? Are you happy with board certification as it is? And part of the problem is that the way that we do board certification was created at a time when it really mattered how much you knew. And right now, because of the other systems that we have in place, the inherent knowledge that you have is less important than knowing where things are. And because things are changing so rapidly, you have to look things up anyways. And so a high-stakes exam at this point just does not make as much sense. And so all the other specialties, so right now family medicine has the most rigorous board certification of any specialty. And most everybody else is going to a quarterly questionnaire, KSA kind of system. And even the Board of Pediatrics is getting rid of their exam. So stay tuned, because we're going to have some word for you about what's going to happen in the future, or else. And then medical students. I'm really glad you guys have so many residencies here. That's great. The number of medical students has increased fairly dramatically. Partly that's because of the osteopathic schools have expanded their student membership significantly, and so that is going to have two implications. One is that we're going to have, it's going to be harder to get into residency because there's going to be it's going to be a little bit more narrow in the future. So that's going to have an impact on international medicine graduates. But the other thing is that we really need more family physicians. We need to start more family medicine residencies across the country. We're looking at a severe deficit of family physicians over the next 10 years. And again, if we're going to do a 15% primary care spend, which is I think really where it ought to be, we're going to need a lot more family physicians. So I'm glad you have as many residencies. I'm sorry you're not keeping as many as you'd like. But there are some other things. The loan repayment I think is going to be key. The students coming out nowadays have just extraordinary debt. And loan repayment can happen either at the state level, but it can also happen at the local level. It's interesting, as I've been telling our city now for the last 20 years that they needed to help with recruiting new physicians. And it probably because I was there, they didn't see any real need. But the fact that I'm going to be president this next year and not going to be there very often has made them a lot more nervous. And so the city itself has put up an additional $60,000 per physician, and for recruiting purposes. And the thing is from a city government perspective, $60,000 is chump change. They spend more than that on fireworks every year. The amount of money that a family physician brings into a community is significant. So it's $1 million per family physician who lives in a community. And so especially in a small community, that can be a real economic driver. So just something to think about too is that it doesn't have to happen at a national level. It doesn't even have to happen at a state level. And if you can get your city governments to start competing with each other for loan repayment, then that's going to help out your graduating residents significantly. And I can tell you that other states are already doing that. So one of the reasons we could do that in Alaska is that a lot of the other communities were putting up just significant signing bonuses and loan repayments. And as soon as you start having one or two local governments doing that, then they all start competing with each other, and that is one way that you can get some more loan repayment to keep people local. It doesn't have to come from your office. Even if you're in private practice, it is such an incentive for a community to have a physician that they should be willing to put up some money for it. And like I say, it's $1 million per family physician. If they're due OB, it's actually $1.5 million. And there's some really good studies to show that there's that economic benefit. And I showed this video last year with the bears. Sorry, it didn't really come through. So this was a video of my wife and I in our hot tub when these 3 bears came by, and but it was fine. But you know that when there's 3 brown bear cubs or grizzly bear cubs, that there's going to be the mama bear, and she came right up to us and sniffed us and then kept on going. And but it tells a lot about the importance of relationships. Because I had run into those bears, that family of bears, repeatedly. I'd been riding my bike and I'd run into them, and just to let them know I was there, I'd sing Bear Necessities because they seemed to like that, and so, and sure enough, they came into our yard, and they were just like, oh, okay, hey guys, and then just kept on going, and so it is important. Those relationships are important, and that's why, again, from an advocacy point of view, get to know your representatives and your senators, because you never know when they're going to show up in your yard and check you out, I guess. When I was when I was running for the president-elect position, I did tell a story that I had heard years before, and I just say it for just that purpose, and I'll tell you that now. And this wasn't my story; it was a story from a physician, Paul Zimmer, in Kodiak. And in Kodiak, they have really big bears. I mean, this is a medium bear. The grizzly bears in Kodiak are somewhere between 10 and 13 feet tall. They are absolutely enormous. You don't need dinosaurs. You just have to go to Kodiak and check out their bears because they are that big. And one of his patients came in really shook because he was hunting in Kodiak, and all of a sudden this bear came charging out of the brush, knocked him over, and then just stood there with her paw on his chest holding him down. And he wasn't hurt, but he wasn't about to move. And then she waited as her 3 cubs went by. And as soon as they were past, she lifted up her paw and kept going. And that's what I want our academy to be. I want our academy to be the bear. And so you're going to see a much more aggressive academy over the next few years. And you've seen that already with the ABFM. We've told them exactly what we want, and if they don't do it, we're going to do something different. And you're going to see that happening a lot at national level as well. Any questions?
I noticed you and Michelle look kind of nervous, and we do the resident knowledge poll, and we'll be judges on that again. There was a question that I presented a few years ago that was not added to the knowledge bowl because it was felt it was too obscure, but Alaska and New Jersey are at the far ends of population density in the United States. And the question for the residents in the geography section was, what is the factor difference in population density between those 2 states? Do you have any idea?
Oh boy, I think in Alaska it's somewhere around 1 person per square mile.
1.1 with the current census.
Yeah.
New Jersey is 1,100. So there's exactly a 1,000 multiplication factor difference. So if you're feeling a little claustrophobic, okay, we understand, because this probably represents most of the population of Valdez to you just in this room right now.
It's very different. Although I have to say that your forests here look impenetrable. I don't know how you even go through them. It's incredibly dense.
Just to counter his point a little bit, if you go up to Sussex County where I used to live, lots of farms, lots of trees and stuff. So you can see the other side of New Jersey. Just a clarification on my double thumbs down before. It's not so much about the recertification process. I brought this up in Pennsylvania now. It's the maintenance of certification process. This is become, I won't repeat some of the words they said at some of the meetings, but it's like cumbersome, complicated, changes, and outrageously expensive. We're already facing, an income crisis already, and now we have to pay out to the board. It's almost like, blackmail. to be able to practice. So, I'd really like the Academy to address that part of it too, if you guys could.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what I said, is that we have explained that to them. And so the part of the problem is that the ABFM really feels that family physicians love them and they love the process, and that there are 6 people in the entire country that don't like it.
I'm one of the 6.
Yeah, I know. So it's and so part of the reason why we came up with our 4th recommendation was just that, is to let them know how people really feel about it. And admittedly, a lot of people just kind of go through the whole process. I think that you are going to see that it's going to be cheaper. They've said that they will make it less cumbersome.
I'll see.
But this is one of those things that we are pushing harder than we ever have, and so we'll see. Just remember, though, that the Aafp and the ABFM are completely separate organizations.
Yeah, I know that.
We
I know
have
that,
no common governance. Having said that, I have told them that the system as it is now is not going to continue.
Yeah. Well, you guys are our voice to them, so it needs to be loud and very clear.
Okay, Mama Bear, we got it.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Excellent presentation, as usual. Question I had is that it generated in my mind when you were speaking about our residencies, because we have a number of great residencies in this state, and they turn out excellent family physicians. The question I have is that, as somebody who's also involved in a residency in my health system, is that we don't see a large percentage of our own schools' students actually applying to family medicine in New Jersey, and it's all somewhat related to the end results that we saw in the video before. But as we're going to be getting more aggressive as an academy, I was wondering about your ideas or other best practices you've seen around the country as to how do we get our medical schools to put out a specific amount of family physician residents that will help us to ultimately serve the workforce needs. I think in our state it's probably less than 10% per year out of a large class that ever goes into family medicine. And now that we have 2 new med schools, one of them a few years ago was developed with the idea of generating primary care physicians. I don't personally see that that's happening any more than the other 2 schools we had. And there's a brand new school that also has the same intent, and we'll see what happens there. But I think we want to be able to get in front of that process. So I was interested in your thoughts on that.
If you are having 10% of your class, that's probably pretty good, because a lot of places are worse than that. And you're right, that absolutely has to change. We want 25% of graduating medical students going into family medicine by 2030. That's the goal. So 25 by 30. And I think we need that if we're going to address both our workforce issues as well as the cost of the healthcare system overall. To do that, we're going to have to really increase the number of residency slots. There's just no way around that. But sort of to answer your question, boy, there's so many aspects to this. One is that medical schools, by and large, are very toxic to family medicine, and I don't know why that is. It's a tribalism in medicine that is really unique, and I have to admit that I really felt that when I was at the AMA meeting this last week. It's just it's an interesting thing, and I wish I had a really good answer for it. I think that but part of that is that we need to be very clear about the value of family medicine and be really proud about what we do, and when we're talking with them. And then if somebody is exhibiting that kind of tribal behavior, we need to call them on it. I mean, we're referring our patients to the specialist, and we have to decide whether or not we're going to do that with somebody who doesn't value what we do. So that's one thing. The second thing is that there's something called the Dean's Lie, which is that medical schools will boast how many people go into primary care, but a lot of that has to do with going into internal medicine with the idea then that people will subspecialize into cardiology, endocrinology, rheumatology, et cetera. And so if you're going to really look at what the percent of people are going into primary care, you need to look at it down the road about 5 years. And I think that using that as a stipulation is probably the way to go, especially if those medical schools are receiving state money. And so that's sort of the other part. And then the third is that kind of where things are going. this is not a good time to be going into a medical subspecialty. And actually, I would argue that it's not a great time to go into a lot of the surgical ones either. So, and the reason why I say that is that we're seeing a lot of development of artificial intelligence type systems that are going to really help us as family physicians, and much less the medical subspecialties. There's something called Ibm Watson Health, and we had a presentation on the board from the head of that. And he talked about when they came up with the program, they decided that they would do something easy, so they decided on family medicine as their first thing. And you guys are all nodding your head because you know what would happen is that after 9 months, they realized that it was getting nowhere. They had invested all this money, and the system was not working at all, and they were going to have to bag the whole thing. So they decided to try a different specialty just to see if they could get it to work with something different. And so they picked oncology, and Ibm Watson Health had oncology down in a month. It's very good at oncology. It reviews all the latest literature. It comes up with treatment programs and protocols. It's very good at oncology. It's very good at radiology. It reads x-rays as well as a radiologist. And it's going to be, they're already doing rheumatology, endocrinology, all of this, the medical subspecialties where you really don't need to see the patient, and it's algorithm-based medicine. And so this is not the time to be going into the specialties because we're going to need a lot less of them. That's my own feeling. I think that it's going to be that we're going to just need a lot more, we're going to need more family medicine, and the technology is going to lend itself to what we do in our offices. We're going to see a lot less hospital care. We're going to be able to do more out of our offices. I think that the economics of it are going to declare themselves, and we're going to see a resurgence in family medicine within the next couple of years. That's my feeling. So I think we need to ramp up the residencies as well.
I've got more of a Washington, D.C. question, and I like that term tribalism you used earlier because it struck me. You know, it seems like for the past few years, the Affordable Care Act has just been a political target to sort of get people riled up and get them to the polls, and it doesn't seem like there's been much bipartisan movement, you know, on health care. And just recently, the Justice Department decided to stop defending parts of the Affordable Care Act, from what I understand. From your view, I mean, you've been to Washington and you've talked to these people. Does it seem like there's any chance of bipartisan movement on health care over the next few years, or is this, at least at a national level, just going to be, you know, continue to be a political football?
I think that really depends on what happens in November. So there are representatives and senators that are trying to work on that, of which Lisa Murkowski, Senator Collins, they're all kind of a part of this group that is trying to come up with a bipartisan approach to health care and to fix the things of the ACA that need to be fixed, because they do. It was just kind of put in place without a lot of evidence behind a lot of the things that they were doing. And, you know, just to get it to be a workable system. Having said that, there is such antipathy towards the ACA among some members in Congress that I don't know if anything is actually going to happen until after November. If there is a blue wave, then I think that we'll see that it gets fixed. If there's not, I don't know. But I do think that is going to be probably one of the biggest campaign features that we're going to see is about health care. Because it's an important one. People don't want to see going back to where pre-existing conditions are denied. Right now, the biggest cause of bankruptcy is still medical costs. And so, you know, what do people vote on? They vote on finances predominantly. That's probably the biggest, and then other issues. But if medical care is really expensive, then that's going to be I think that's going to be probably the big issue for the next campaign.
Hi, yes, first of all, thank you for standing up for us and your great leadership. My question for the board and President and everybody else is, how do we make sure the technology we're facing with, we are able to cope with it and we fairly be treated? For instance, my concern, I found out prescriptions sent electronically was not actually sometimes sent. And I don't know how to address that, because we are liable in the law of I, that we are responsible for our quality. And I don't know any one of us has the time to check in your system every day actually how many scripts were received and which one were not. But my system did not warn me that my script was not sent. I mean, successfully. It says prescribed, but it didn't go through. And it happened many, many, many times. I was wondering what the heck happened here. So I called the pharmacy. They said they never got it. Actually, my attorney friend happened to be my patient, and the prescription failed to send 3 times. And finally, I had to went on the line with the pharmacy and send the script over. So I'm not sure any one of you had this problem. With the technology going on, I was joking with my husband, who is actually IT, and they say you're not only kind of like causing problem at home sometimes, but you're also causing problem, in the career. Because what he explained to me is that prescription would go to the headquarters of my computer system, then it would distribute to the headquarters of the pharmacy program, and then pharmacy headquarters will go to the individual pharmacy. So anything trafficking between in this networking has problem, then the prescription will not send successfully. So here comes the final thing then. If half my script did not go through, so who's responsible? I thought the law should be saying the engineer has responsibility as well, besides us, to, just to be fair, to say, I'm not sure any one of you agree, because it's not fair that the doctor has the malpractice insurance, so everybody sue after the doctor, and it's not fair. So I don't know how this will work in the real world, because it involves many infrastructure changes or responsibility of the trafficking as well. Any ideas from anyone is welcome, because I truly don't know. I don't have time to check every day how many scripts went through. I thought it should be a system that in the screen that was prescribed and say, whether it's sent successfully or not. So.
I agree with you completely. It's really interesting is we're from our office, when I send a script down the street, so it's literally a quarter mile, it takes about 3 to 4 hours to get there electronically. Now, admittedly, it has to go to Tennessee, to the clearinghouse first, but it might as well go to Jupiter and back. I think that's about the same amount of time. And it's the craziest system. The problem is that the electronic health record vendors and really do not have any interest in changing things at this moment in time. I mean, that's the reality. If there's going to be something that is going to be better, it probably has to be something that's new, because that's just what happens with technology, is that when you get an industry that's in control, they like to keep things the same because that's cheaper for them. And we have electronic record systems that are not effective and don't work. And it's incredibly frustrating. That's one of the banes of our existence as physicians in this day and age, is that we got to deal with these things. And like I said, the vendors really don't have a big incentive to change, and so it's probably going to have to be something completely new that's going to come along that's going to be disruptive. Now, having said that, the only other approach we have is legislative.
Right, yeah.
And but just something to bear in mind is that just the head of the vendor that has 4 letters in its name and begins with E, she alone is making millions and millions of dollars. So the amount of money she can contribute towards advocacy is substantial, and much more than any one of us can. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that's how government works. is that if you are going to be involved in advocacy, you have to have, right on your side, right? It's not fair for us to have to deal with this. It's not fair, right? And so that's our argument. But then you have to be effective politically. And to be effective politically, you have to have an organization, and that's what the AAFP is. And the organization, we have lobbyists that this is all they do, is they work on issues surrounding electronic health records and how to make them better, right? So that's the second part. But the third part is the Political Action Committee. The only way that we are going to get anything done is if we have enough money in our Political Action Committee that we can counteract some of the impact that these very, very wealthy companies have that have the EHR. Sorry, I wish it wasn't that way. I would love to live in a world where because it's not fair that would count, but that's actually not the world we live in. And so I'm going to actually encourage all of you to donate to the American Academy of Family Physicians Political Action Committee. If all of us kicked in money, then we could actually counteract some of the political impact that the big companies have. But that's the only way we're going to accomplish this. Either is we find a disruptive technology, which are probably coming, or that we legislate that, and to legislate that, we need to be effective politically, and that it means money.
Thank you. We will.
Okay.
Since we brought up Political Action Committee, I just want everyone in the room to know that if you donate nationally, which I encourage everyone to do, it doesn't go to our state. So I also ask everyone to donate to our state action committee, because we really need it with some of the things we're anticipating over the next year. Independent practice is a hot topic in New Jersey. We're losing independent practice at an alarming rate. Most of the hospitals are buying up practices, and it's become a big issue. And I think that's happening nationally as well. You mentioned the AAFP partnering with the Texas Society and I think Florida Society on this. Are the other AAFP chapters involved, invited? I would really like New Jersey to be involved in something like that.
Yeah, so for Pepsi, which is a horrible name, I was not responsible in any way, shape, or form for that. And that's just the Partnership for Empowering Physician-Led Care Teams or something. But anyways, terrible name. But to be a member is about $15,000. And but there are going to have some smaller things, some smaller donations to be a part of it. It's cheaper for physician groups, but it's still fairly expensive. It just got going. We just started this 3 months ago.
How can we get more information on it?
Yeah, if you look up Pepsi, there's a website, and they'll go into that in more detail. But I think that is going to be the key, is to get some more groups involved in this.
I just wanted to say I appreciate your slide comparing the growth of administration to the growth of the number of physicians over time, and I've actually kept a copy of that slide on my phone for years to show people why healthcare is as expensive as it is. In saying that, and in my experience with alternative payment models and involvement in CPC over the last now 6 years, with initially CPC Initiative, seeing that the increased payments from these APMs just continue to generate more administration within a practice. And as an independent practitioner in the state of New Jersey, and have been since we opened our practice, and don't really intend on becoming a non-independent practice anytime in the near future, I just see that these dollars, they're geared toward increasing the staff and administration for tracking all of these measures and arbitrary things that people determine that's how they're going to judge how well we do our jobs. That may not be relevant to the practice or the patient, thus worsening the growth of the administration and not helping the doctors to improve their
practice's quality of life, their staff's quality of life, their own quality of life, and helping to decrease our debt. So these dollars, they don't ultimately trickle down to us. They trickle down to staff and generating more jobs and more administration. Somebody said yesterday that we need to reward the goal and not the process. And it seems that these APMs and these programs simply reward the process of clicking off quality measures and not necessarily focus on the goal of reducing the cost of care. You talk about these savings in ACOs. This one saved $50 million, that one saved $200 million, this one saved $5 million. But much of that goes to administrative burden and not to the actual providers. So I just wanted to say that I would hope that the AFP would continue to find a way or work to find a way to reward the goal and not the process, so that we as the CEOs of these practices and these communities who manage a fairly large amount of spending dollars can actually have some reward in this and not burn out like we're doing, just trying to keep the ball rolling.
I hear you. So well, first off, the whole idea between our APC APM is that it does reduce the amount of administration. There's only 6 quality measures, and the whole intent is that would be the same 6 across, regardless of which insurance that you have. That is, that we want everybody to accept ours rather than for us to accept theirs. Because, we have, where our practice is, we have 30 different insurances that we have to deal with, each of which has their own quality measures. We do them as best we can, but we can't spend the time to doing it. And so, but six, especially 6 that we've come up with, are probably doable. And so, it's funny because when I was on the advisory committee for rural health, for Health and Human Services, that was right when they were rolling out the ACA, and they actually came up with 360 quality measures that they wanted us to do because they thought it would be really easy. And going back to the EHR question, they had been told by the EHR vendors that this would be really easy, that all this data would just be accessible, and that physicians wouldn't actually have to do anything. And I fought really hard for one, which was are you a family physician? And yes, and then that would be it. But they didn't go for that, unfortunately. We did get it whittled down to 80, and then so it's the problem is that the people who are making decisions have no idea what we go through, and by and large, they are not physicians. That's something where that's another part of advocacy, is to be involved in those decision-making bodies, the advisory committees and things like that. That's really important because, so for the advisory committee on rural health, I was the only physician. And actually, I was the only rural physician. I was actually the only rural provider. We had a guy that he spent all his time in New York and LA, and if he wanted to go rural, he went to Chicago. And so we were going to rural communities like Kansas City and Traverse City, Michigan, and it's amazing how much impact you can have if you can get into those decision-making bodies and advisory capacity bodies. Having said that, I absolutely agree with you.
I've added, probably 5 staff members over the last 5 years. Creating more layers of administration, lengthening office visits to try to get in all of the things that need to be documented within a visit to show that you're doing as good a job as they want you to do, creating longer waits in the office, and more stress for us as practice managers to run the business and keep. I'm the great plate spinner. Remember the plate spinners, and they keep all these things and run from one to another to try to keep them all from falling down, and it just creates more and more layers of bureaucratic stress, and it's no wonder why we're suffering from burnout so much as a profession, because you can't do what you really want to do, which is just take care of your patients, and instead you've got to handle, you got to make sure you get the PHQ-9 done, and you got to get
the vaccines, and you got to get to this, and you got to get that done before you can even attempt to handle the patient's 7 complaints that they saved up because they don't want to come in more than once in a year to, preaching to the choir. But
so there, one thing else to consider, just to throw it out there, is the direct primary care model, and there are definitely some things that haven't worked as well for that as we were hoping. But it is something that is increasing. Right now, about 3.5% of our membership is in direct primary care, and it is increasing. And so with direct primary care, you don't have any of that. It is, absolutely. And there are some things that we're working on to make it easier. One of those is to have the health savings account money go into paying the monthly fee. It seems like people are really, it's very easy to get a quarter of their panel. Getting up to the half of what they want is difficult, and there's a lot of people who are just kind of stuck there at about 50% of what they want. And part of that is just the high deductible plans. I mean, but there are some tweaks that we could do with that make DPC a more viable alternative. And at that point, that may be the model. I think that though that what we tried to do is incorporate some of those aspects of the DPC model into our APC so that to reduce that bureaucratic cost. Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're doing wrong in this country is we are spending way too much on administration, and it is not helping patient care.
I mean, we do have the pilot going with the state, as you know, but good point. The question
we should work a little bit more on using the microphone because
Okay.
we are being taped and
Okay.
streamed. I know you, Steve, but
Okay.
Ken, please, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So the question I have, just staying on the advocacy theme, I really liked what you said about AI, and I think that it's showing that the computers are already better than people at reading films, and there's good data to suggest that robots of some sort will do TAVR and myomectomies and stuff like that. You'll still have a surgeon; she'll still be overseeing it, but the actual, precision that computers just can do better than people with that part of it. But the question I have for you, getting back to primary care, is your self-reflection and self-critique of health is primary and all the stuff that's going on, because I still hear, sadly, from subspecialists and administrators that, well, primary care is just going to be one part telemedicine and people on their phones, another part convenient care of some sort. So really, family docs, general internists like myself, maybe pediatricians still, because parents want to take their kids to people and family physicians. But how do you respond to that, this notion that, and then again in your important advocacy work, that again, that I hear from certain subspecialists like cardiologists and neurosurgeons and administrators, that, well, primary care is just going to kind of go away because it'll just sort of bleed into this confluence of apps and telemedicine and convenient care, which I disagree with. I mean, I think it's cognitive, humanistic, and hands-on cognitive.
So who here has walked into an exam room and within 5 seconds known what the diagnosis was? And I had a case not too long ago where I walked in the room. It was a 3-year-old, and I recognized that she had leukemia. And it was about that. It took about that long. And the reason why I say that is not because that's supernatural skill or anything like that. It's not. What it is that the way our brains work is that we have a lot of parallel processing. We have a lot that we use a lot of our senses, for example, in terms of interpreting what is happening. And so, I mean, it's everything from smell to the expressions of the parents to the child to the, there's just a whole lot of things that come in. And there's an entire part of the brain that deals with empathy that is what we use to make diagnoses. And that's the reason why this notion of telemedicine taking over primary care is false, is that you really need to see the patient. You have to be with the patient. Besides that, there were some really interesting studies on empathy where it looked at,
if your physician is more empathetic, you actually have somewhere around 12 to 24 hours less symptoms with influenza. And so there is something about that process of healing with the person that you're not ever going to see with either computers or with telemedicine. And so I actually give a whole talk. I think I gave that here last year about empathy and what that role that plays. But I just talk about it just in those terms. And I get very upset with people saying that telemedicine is going to. And actually, I just chewed out the head of ACOG about this last week. Because he thought that telemedicine was the way to fix rural health care, and I explained, not very politely, that wasn't the case. And beyond, I think that ultimately it's going to be what works. And I think that at some point, it may be that physicians are obsolete. But I can guarantee you that the last physicians standing are going to be primary care. And we're going to be using all those other parts. When you mentioned the surgery, you're right, there's a STAR program that does autonomous surgery. I had an OB-GYN in Anchorage who was not a very good surgeon. I just didn't ever refer patients. She picked up the Da Vinci. All of a sudden, she's a pretty good surgeon. We're not going to need as many specialists. And I think that they don't realize that, but I think it's going to be apparent over the next few years. Beyond that, I think it's just whenever you hear things like that, making sure you stand up. The future is not in telemedicine, except the other way. I mean, I think that having telemedicine in my office where I can talk to a pediatric rheumatologist in California, I think that there is definitely a use for that. But beyond that, you need to have that person involvement. I don't think that's ever going to change. I think that having computer diagnosis is going to be helpful, but unless you're trying to diagnose computers, you need a person involved.
Well, having been an IT professional before medical school, diagnosing computers is often much easier than our actual patients. And just a quick one, the reason I went into family medicine was having seen one of my instructors, Don Middleton at UPMC, somebody showed him a family photo. And from the family photo, while I was there, he said, call them up. The retinal reflex on one of the people in the photo wasn't equal. And they had a retroorbital mass starting from the photo. And I just thought that was remarkably the coolest thing I'd ever seen in medicine, and then decided to do family medicine. So it's kind of neat. Yeah. One quick thing, though, talking about administration, we have a new governor here. Just had his blue ribbon committee. I just thought the word irony fit because in New Jersey it's very prevalent. One of the key members is a CEO of a hospital system. Since it's not-for-profit hospital system, a lot of information is available online. And you can find a lot of the salaries for individuals. A gentleman who does not touch a patient has a yearly salary of $3.3 million, which I think could roughly pay off, 10 of our residents' education debts just by itself. Money goes the wrong places. Thanks.
I couldn't agree with you more. The head of United Health. $105
million compensation.
I mean, what can you do with that amount of money? I don't know. I mean, I can't even imagine. How many houses do you need? It's
the prior president, who was caught in a stock scandal, repaid and paid penalties that totaled over $900 million. Mr. McGuire, former pulmonologist, was still a multi-billionaire after paying back about $950 million in stock reimbursements and penalties. So,
hey, John, how are you?
Good.
So I wanted to bring your attention, talk about telemedicine issues. It's complicated, as you all know, because let me give you an example of what's happening by us in New Jersey, one of the most heavily populated physician states. So a healthcare group, Chelsea, it's a 16-site assisted living group, is been conned, I'll use the word conned, into hiring a physician and ER physician, I might add, to be medical director of their 16 locations in New Jersey. Another group called Brandywine is doing the same thing. And this is a remote telemedicine physician providing geriatric care. Now, I can tell you some of the guys around the and gals around the room are in Vanguard. We're pretty involved with telemedicine in the 15 to 65 age group. It's appropriate as an extra extension of the practice we do in our office with our patients. But when we see the use and possible misuse of telemedicine in areas that are highly physician populated by non-primary care physicians, aka an ER physician, and they have gotten the leadership of this group to both hire them as the medical directors, which is already inappropriate. Secondly, to provide remote physician diagnostics, including, if you haven't seen it around the room, they have a computer with a stethoscope that is attached. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, a non-health professional, probably a patient care assistant, would put that up next to the chest of a 92-year-old gentleman and propose to diagnose heart failure or anything of the likes through a remote process. So we have to all be careful that telemedicine is useful as an adjunct to what we do as primary care physicians, but it is not a replacement thereof, because in rural Alaska, it's a different ballgame with the bears. But in New Jersey, where I always joke, you can take a football out of my window and hit 50 specialists on the head very easily any given day, where I am in New Jersey, 45 minutes west of Manhattan. The proliferation of use and misuse of telemedicine becomes dangerous. So I just make that point of information so you can be aware what's happening in New Jersey, John, because I believe in telemedicine. I think it's helpful in the right usages, but it should be an extra piece of what we do as primary care physicians in the office when necessary. Thanks. Comments?
I agree with you. I mean, it's the problem is that, and we've seen this for years, is that there's this dream of technology as being the solution. For years, I was receiving telemedicine carts with a stethoscope and an electronic otoscope, and I would just much rather have had the money that went into that so I could pay off, to recruit more physicians. That's really what I needed. And so there's this dream of technology that we keep falling for over and over and over again. And I think that it'll be interesting to see. I think that we can use the technology, and actually the Academy is coming up with a telemedicine platform that we can use. Fairly straightforward, fairly simple one. But this is something where we have to show our value. A value of in-person visits, and I think that's sort of the other thing. I think some of this, that's the advantage of going to a value-based system is that a value-based system you can actually show quality, and in our current system it's all about dollars and cents.
Joe, I know you want to finish up, but one more just comment. So on the reverse side, medical students, I have conversations with young students, not just in my primary care office, but in my genetics office, and they're always telling me they're worried. They're really worried they're going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. And so you have to reassure them that, again, it's there, and computers will improve, and we'll learn more how to denote inflections of responses from patients. But I don't see in the very short term how you can replace a physician, particularly a family physician, with a computer, even with AI, with the way we handle patients. But the upcoming student population, I know there's some around here today, they are truly worried that AI and other use of computers could replace them, which then leads them to worry about thinking incorrectly that family medicine is where they're replaced, because it's harder for them to perceive that a spleen could be taken out by a computer, so they think a surgeon needs to be a surgeon, but a cognitive thinker could be replaced. Then, of course, you go to the Watson story and tell them you can't replace us with IBM. It's a whole long story. I don't want to keep it going. But it's worrisome when the students' population are worried about computers replacing what we do as family physicians.
Well, I think they have every right to be worried about it if they have $500,000 in loans. But what I would argue then is that if they're worried about it, then they shouldn't go into any of the subspecialties, because the family physicians are going to be the last stock standing, and we may all end up being family physicians with access to sophisticated systems, but we're here to stay. You know, there's a reason why on Star Trek Bones was a family physician, right? We're going to be the last stock standing. All right.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. It is really great fun for me to be able to join you. I just looking at the agenda for your conference for this weekend, it just strikes me how you really are at the front lines of all of our healthcare needs in communities, both when it comes to physical health issues, clearly you're looking at diabetes and other issues like that, but also the behavioral health issues that I'm sure you're increasingly seeing in your practice, and how we work together to meet those needs for both mental health and substance use disorders. The other thing that strikes me is the session that you were having, I guess it's today, maybe tomorrow, on bleeding emergencies. To me, that was a marker of how you're the front line in every community for the challenges that we see in today's world, and how important it is that we have the supports to be able to make sure that you can do your business well. In addition, I saw on your agenda that you're working through social determinants of health, which is something that we care deeply about in the Department of Human Services, because under one roof in the New Jersey Department of Human Services, we have the Medicaid program, which covers 1.7 million lives in the state of New Jersey. But we also have the SNAP program that provides food assistance to more than 800,000 people in the state. We also provide child care subsidies for lower income residents. We are the TANF, so the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and the Emergency and General Assistance programs, which means that our programs help support people who are in housing crises or other emergency crises who need supports to be able to get stabilized, and then allow us to work with them to find longer-term housing solutions. We also are the entity that provides supports and services across both in the community and in the home for people with developmental disabilities. And we run the aging programs for the state of New Jersey. So our department runs the congregate dining facilities, the home delivered meals, as well as respite care and other services through the Older Americans Act to support people across the state. So that's who we are. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself, just to give you a sense of who I am coming to the table. Thank you for the kind introduction. I don't want to spend a lot more time on that, but I was fortunate to spend several years working in the Obama White House on implementing the Affordable Care Act. And some of the things that were in the Affordable Care Act that get less attention than others, but are nonetheless vitally important, are the things that we tried to do to support the primary care workforce. So things like creating the Teaching Health Center program, which was really a recognition that the physician community and the training for physicians needs to continue to think about ways to engage with the community during the training process. And so we were able to create a new GME model where some of that training could take place in federally qualified health centers. We also were able to create the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, which I know you all have worked with as part of the Comprehensive Primary Care Initiative. So that was really a way for the Affordable Care, through the Affordable Care Act, for us to say the strict lines of how Medicare pays for services may not be getting us to the most innovative care delivery models. So let's create a space where we can test and design new innovative ideas and try to see what works and see what we can take to scale. And I know how important you and your national association have been as partners in that effort. So I really want to thank your leadership for the invitation to be here today. It was really terrific to get that invite and to really applaud the work you do for caring for the whole family. I mean, you see people through the generation, you see people across the broad spectrum of conditions, and you help them address things that are probably not things we traditionally think about as happening inside the clinical walls. And that makes a great difference, and we recognize that. One of the other things we were able to do in the Affordable Care Act, which I would love to talk to you about how you're seeing this implemented in practice, it was really to require health plans in the individual and small group market to cover preventative services for free. So preventative services without co-pays, without cost sharing, if they were recommended by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force. And so that's everything from mammograms to cholesterol screenings to STI screenings and the like. And so we know that that is an important part of the work that you do every day, and we were happy to be able to establish those kind of baseline expectations and requirement that prevention doesn't need to be a hurdle, that it needs to be part of the usual course of care. So we know you're on the front lines of care delivery and how the system is and can be changing to drive the value equation in healthcare. And at the department, we want to work together with you to improve health outcomes, but also to understand how changes in the care delivery system are impacting your business model. We know this is a sort of a 360 experience for you, and we want to understand how that's working and where the opportunities are for and where the challenges are that we can work together on. Particularly, my lens is the Medicaid program, but the governor also recently asked me to chair the State Health Benefits Task Force, where we're going to take a look at the State Health Benefits Program to see how we can make it a leader in the value-based world. So the Murphy administration is really focused on improving health outcomes, improving our focus on value, and how we can directly affect that using our leverage as a purchaser. We also are moving quickly to try to address some of what, as we came in to the new administration this year, one of the things that I wanted to make a priority was look as quickly as we could at where some of the gaps are in our Medicaid program to be able to fill those gaps as part of our budget proposal this year. So as you may know, June is budget month in Trenton, and there's a lot of back and forth debate right now about the governor's budget. But I wanted to share with you a few of the things we were able to include in the governor's budget that I think will have relevance to your practice for Medicaid patients. So first, we are expanding family planning benefits up to 200% of the federal poverty level. We both, one of the first things the governor did was restore the funding for family planning clinics that had long been denied in the previous administration. And then he also signed legislation ensuring that family planning benefits are available significantly above the federal poverty line. We also have changed the policy. New Jersey was a bit of an outlier in not allowing long-acting reversible contraception in the postpartum setting. So we changed that policy right away. We don't need to wait for the budget to do that. We were able to do that right away. We also are, as part of the budget, anticipating expanding diabetes prevention programs. So we are going to focus on self-management, education, and training. We also are proposing to implement the National Diabetes Prevention Program, which many of you know is the evidence-based strategy that the Y has developed that we actually ran through the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, and it was one of the early test cases of something that proved effective and could be taken to scale. So we're going to be able to do that. Not a lot of states are doing that, but we're trying to do that here because you know better than anyone that if you can get in front of prediabetes, we're going to save ourselves a lot of heartache for individuals and a lot of cost for the system. We also are going to create in the base Medicaid program an autism spectrum disorder benefit, which you may be surprised to know, or maybe you've tried to do this before and it's not surprising to you. It was surprising to me that a state like New Jersey that has such a high prevalence rate did not have an autism spectrum disorder benefit in our base Medicaid program. We had a very small pilot of under 200 kids in a program, but there are an estimated 10,000 kids in this state who have somewhere on the spectrum, and we're going to make sure that those benefits are available. That's going to take us a little bit of time to design and implement because we want to make sure we do it right and we really consider the evidence. But if the budget passes, we will work on that this fall. We also are going to change policy that we were a bit of an outlier, particularly with our neighboring states when it came to hepatitis C. So in the New Jersey Medicaid program to date, you've had to prove not that you just had a hepatitis diagnosis, but that you had some liver damage. So you had to, you're all clinicians, you know this better than I do, you had to say you were at F2 to be able to get access to curative hepatitis C drugs through this New Jersey Medicaid program. What we propose in the budget is to take that to F0 and say, once you have a diagnosis, you should be able to get access to the treatment. One of the governor's signature initiatives here in the budget from a public health policy perspective is he has a $100 million proposal to combat the opioid epidemic in the budget that's being debated right now. And the thing that the governor really wanted to make sure we were focusing on is how we were being as strategic as possible with those resources. You may know, I mean, you probably know, in previous budget fights, there's been a lot of contentious debate about opioid resources and how we can combat the epidemic. Turns out that a lot of that fight ended up with some money on the books that didn't actually make it out the door. So we want to be strategic about what we should be investing in, and then moving that money as quickly and promptly as possible so that in this all-hands-on-deck environment, we have all the resources that we need to be able to combat the epidemic. So our $100 million initiative is focused on three things. One, improving our data infrastructure so that we have more real-time information to be able to respond and tackle the crisis. Two, really thinking about the outpatient component of the prevention, treatment, and recovery strategy. So we at Medicaid are in the midst of implementing a waiver we got from the feds to allow us to draw down federal resources to help support detox inpatient and outpatient, detox short-term and long-term residential treatment. So what our budget proposal does is says we really need to build up our capacity in the community on the outpatient treatment side. And so we're focused aggressively on that. From my perspective, that's a huge opportunity and should be something that we move as quickly as possible on. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that. And then finally, the third bucket is the governor is very strategic about thinking about what the recovery pathways look like and how recovery is, it's very important that we have peer support and we have those kind of social supports for people in recovery, but there also are other social risk factors that we need to address in order to sustain people in recovery, and those include things like housing and employment. And so we're looking at strategies to make sure that we are bringing those stakeholders to the table and investing in some of those components of what it takes to sustain people in recovery. But just to come back to the outpatient piece for a moment, this is a place where I'd love to hear your ideas and get your help because we need an all-hands-on-deck approach here. We need as many primary care physicians data waived as possible to provide buprenorphine and the appropriate counseling services. We need a strategy that really supports you in doing that work because I know you're seeing these folks in your practice. I know that it's challenging to figure out how to refer them or what their needs are. And so we are trying to think through how, from a reimbursement perspective, we can create the right set of reimbursement services to be able to make that something that primary care, community-based primary care physicians can do and feel comfortable doing. But I'd love to hear from you about what you think the barriers are and where you think some of those opportunities are, because as you know, the ASAM guidelines say community-based medication-assisted treatment is an important part of the equation here, and we want to help create that infrastructure by looking strategically at our reimbursement policies. So I thank you for that in advance because I know I will benefit from hearing your views on that. And I just want to say I've been back in New Jersey. I grew up in Cape May. I am back here home for this job. I'm so honored that the governor gave it to me, but I'm really looking forward to working with you because before I worked at the Obama White House, I worked for the Health Resources and Services Administration on the healthcare workforce. And so there we really tried to be as creative as possible about using federal grant dollars to drive primary care training, because we know that this is where you are the lifeline for so many people, and you are the hub for so many people that make all those community connections, and we knew we had to do a better job of leveraging our federal resources to invest in that training. We knew that it was not always a revenue generator for the medical schools, and we needed to put some federal dollars in primary care training. And so I have had the opportunity in other parts of my career to really try to support your community, and so I have valued the lessons learned and your input, and so I'm really hoping together in New Jersey we can make great strides. So thank you. Yeah. So I'm just going to take a few questions. Do you want to go? Okay. Folks have any questions or comments?
I definitely do. My name is Tom Ortiz. I practice in Newark, New Jersey, the epicenter for most of the ills that we talk about in terms of afflicting New Jersey. But, and I got to thank you very much for being here today with us, because we're very excited about the new administration. For the past 8 years, we've been talking to deaf ears, and we really have not made any accomplishments since the ACA was accomplished. Yes, we've been working in CPCI. Yes, we've been doing transformation work and so forth, but with a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
And we have not had the breakthrough that we needed to, as our president-elect was saying from the National Academy, that we built the PCMH coach, but we only hooked the donkey up to it in terms of pulling it. So we need to come up with a good horse that can help pull us along.
Can I ask you for just a quick clarification? When you say that with some resistance, is that from the Medicaid program, from the plan environment?
From state government Medicaid program, and the previous commissioner of Health and Human Services, and also the previous governor, when it came particularly around electronic interoperability and getting people covered under the ACA and the state insurance exchange, and now the fact that we're now going backwards and losing people off the Medicaid program that we put on the Medicaid program.
I can't thank you enough for raising that, because the governor has charged all of us in the cabinet with doing everything possible to ensure that we are reaching out to folks for enrollment this year, because we know the feds are going to play with that window again. And so if you all have ideas on that, I'd love to hear them too.
Well, we'd like to see the parity with Medicaid come back. That would be one, because when you come to the basics, it's what is Medicaid reimbursing us to do all the services that we need to do with the lowest in the country in terms of that, or is that we're losing doctors from the state, the students can't pay their loans, we can't assist the underserved areas of the state and the people that have otherwise been disenfranchised from the system. So we need to see that come up. We talked about the mandatory primary care payment schedule, which says that the 15% of the healthcare dollars should be spent on primary care. We know that for every dollar that we spend, we're going to save 13. So we are going to help support legislation that's going to allow New Jersey legislators to consider that going from below 5%, which is where we are right now, to a more robust, like many other states are doing that are showing much success. So that would be, one of the main things I would say as a suggestion, that we look at how we can legislate the insurers and Medicaid to pay the right amount to support primary care, so we can do all the things that we want to do. You talk about the detox and there are no detox units in Newark, one of the biggest places where the epidemic is. Okay, why is that? Because Medicaid doesn't pay for it. I ran a detox unit at Columbus Hospital for 5 years. We had to close the program as soon as they changed the law where they were not covering single adults for drug rehab. And so, the first thing we know as doctors, we need to take these patients that want help and detox them. You got to do it medically. It has to be done in a hospital. It has to be done with proper care. I don't believe that the methadone program worked, that the buprenorphine program is going to work. Exchanging one drug for another so you can control them. I can sign people up with managed care, chronic care management contracts, so I can prescribe more narcotics for them, because that's what, same thing we're doing. We're going to give them narcotics anyway. Let's give them the ones that we know are effective. So it's not just about the habit. The other side of that is, what are we doing to control the distribution of those drugs from the manufacturers to the pharmacies, and who's accountable for where all those pills go? We know that some companies are making millions and millions of dollars on producing these pills, putting them on the market, and sometimes we don't know where those pills go. There's no accountability from the manufacturer point of view. Doctors can control the prescriptions, and we can help that process and we can help our chronic disease patients manage that. But I really think that we need to look from the control side of how many pills are coming into the state and where they actually go. We have the registry, we're using it, we have contracts, we're using them. I think we're doing a good job on that end. So those are just a couple of items I can go on and on. Hopefully we
Thank you.
Hope we can have a long time to sit down and talk.
That is really helpful. I would love to.
I do manage
if you
4,000
have
Medicaid
a ledge
patients.
proposal that you're shopping, I'd love to see that. If there's something specific, I think you just mentioned a legislative proposal that you were working on. If you have.
We have a resolution I'm going to pass this afternoon.
Okay, okay. I'd love to see that once it comes through. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you for those comments.
Yeah, actually, I'll slow it down a little bit for you. I'm going to follow up a little bit because some of that was really important, but there was so many things there. But, I think you understand that we have a large shortage of primary care doctors in New Jersey. The other fact is we're not keeping them for multiple reasons, usually money, but they come out with these huge debts. They're going to other states. We're not building up our primary care force. To drive healthcare costs down in New Jersey, we need more primary care. In states that have more primary care, there's lower cost and higher quality. Right now, New Jersey stands on the bottom two in terms of quality and the cost of care. To turn that around, we need the legislation to invest in primary care. One of the ideas for investment is putting some of the percentage of the healthcare dollar devoted to primary care. It's done in other states. Oregon passed it last year. California's about to do it. Before that, Rhode Island, we just heard data about Rhode Island that their cost of care is going, with that investment, up to 13% now. The growth of the spending is going up by 3%, where neighboring states, or 0.3% I think it was, John, where neighboring states, Massachusetts, is going up 5% at the cost of care because they've invested in primary care. We have a lot of ideas. There's some model legislation out there for that. We would love to have connections in Trenton where we can discuss this and hopefully move it forward.
I would love to have the chance to sit down and talk about this. One of the things that would interest me is if they've been in place long enough, the Rhode Island and Oregon model, to attest to whether or not you're getting residents to stay. Because
Rhode Island has, I think right now Oregon's relatively new, but you can get the Rhode Island data very easily.
Good. Okay.
And the second point is you asked us some feedback on the ACA. One of the things ACA had is put out a lot of high deductible plans. That seemed like a nice niche for something called direct primary care. Do you understand direct primary? Yeah. So we were trying to be innovative and bring out direct primary care to supplement the ACA product for people with high deductible that can see a primary care doctor, keep costs down, keep it affordable. We can't do it legally and still participate in the other insurers. We've approached other insurers, and they say legally we can't do it as long as you participate. As you probably know, the Sweeney bill had put out a direct primary care product for the state with a fatal flaw that we told them at the time that they can only be in direct primary care and not anything else. They can't get a doctor. I mean, when I leave my practice to join a direct primary care at risk of all the patients, because I have to get rid of them all unless they switch over to DPC, and there was no guarantee of them how much population you're going to. That was going to fail, and it is failing. We have great ideas about DPC and what we can do to move that forward if that's an interest, but it comes down to legislative roadblocks we have.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Morning, Mary Campagnolo from Burlington County.
Morning.
Thank you for being here. I had just wanted to talk a little bit about two different topics. You mentioned that the first would be GME in our state, and some of it is involved with what Peter was just saying, you know, that we need to keep our medical students and residents who train in family medicine in the state. So you were talking about the teaching health centers, which I think is a great idea, but unfortunately, to my knowledge, we don't have one teaching health center in New Jersey. So I wanted to know about your plans to develop those and as quickly as possible. The other aspect of that is that I asked our national president just before about how we can increase the amounts of our trainees who come through medical school to choosing primary care and family medicine in particular, because we don't see that happening, and we're just expanding our medical school population without developing the kinds of doctors we ultimately need here, and those who do train in family medicine here then also leave. So it keeps compounding our workforce issues for the future, which is pretty scary, I think. The other aspect I think that I wanted to mention was just your question about the buprenorphine certification, and that first of all, we don't have as many doctors in New Jersey accepting Medicaid because of Dr. Ortiz's question that we don't have payment that's sufficient for Medicaid patients in our practices, so that many people will start losing money on every Medicaid patient they see, and they can't afford to do that because we're already one of the lowest paid specialties in the medicine world. But as far as then accepting Medicaid, which I belong to a health system practice that can manage to accept Medicaid and charity care and all the exchange plans, but we get many patients then who are trying to stop opioid use, and they cannot find a way to get the buprenorphine, and we're not certified to give it to them. And so they're ultimately in a situation where they're going to go to Camden and, just get drugs again because we can't get it to them fast enough when they're ready to quit. And so I think some ways of making it less onerous to be able to prescribe that anybody with a medical license and a DEA in New Jersey could somehow do that, would be the way to go. And then again, we need the payment to increase more people to participate with Medicaid as physicians to increase your panel of network for serving the patients.
Hey, can I ask you two quick follow-ups? One, what folks tend to say nationally on GME is that people sort of stick where they train. Is that not the case in New Jersey? We're training and people are leaving. Is that what you're...
Right, and not in family medicine in particular, and some of the other specialties where we will have shortages as well. But we have a lot of different programs in the state, but we don't manage to keep most of our trainees because of the high cost of medical education, the high cost of living here, the high cost of practicing, and the low cost of payments from any of the health plans, but also more from Medicaid.
And on your second point on BUP, can you tell me a little bit about what do you think it would take for your system to do it? Is it the barrier of just getting data waived and getting through the DEA process? Is it that and the reimbursement? Is it one thing, or it's just the combination?
I think all of these things are time and money.
Yeah.
And I think to put it as simply as possible is that basically we need time in our practices to be able to talk to these patients and work through all the issues that surround the social determinants of why they're in the position they're in. And so again, that would reflect back to the payments we get per visit, and then just the value-based project and how we could enhance on that. And again, I think anybody in New Jersey who is recognized in their profession, licensed in the state, and has a CDS and DEA number should be able to prescribe it. And that would help. It's probably not going to be the end-all, but it would help to get
unfortunately,
it done.
we need the feds to do that.
Yeah, and I know there's a
you.
national push for this. It's not unique to our state, so I think hopefully we'll see that with enough states working together.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Hi, I'm Mike Cascarina. I'm a private practitioner in Ocean County, New Jersey. I was wondering if there was any plans for New Jersey to start its own healthcare exchange. Over the past 2 years, there was a near repeal of the Affordable Health Care Act, and the Justice Department recently decided, not to defend some parts of it. So, are there any plans in the wings, sort of just in case?
So what we've done, and it's my colleagues at the Department of Banking and Insurance who have done this, is at least do the thing we can do relatively easily, which is become a partnership exchange, where we take a little more control over the marketplace and the review of products. The challenge that you point to is that all the Fed money to start up your marketplace was on the table years ago, and New Jersey didn't take it. And so finding that money now would be challenging. But I also think what you're pointing to is how do we make sure we have all the belts and suspenders given all of the churn in DC? And that's something that we think carefully about across the Medicaid program, across the marketplace, and the like. But what I like to say is they spent the better part of 2017 trying to undo the Affordable Care Act again and again and again, and it's still the law of the land. The Medicaid program has not changed, and it's more popular than ever. So we're continuing to move forward as aggressively as we can, thinking carefully about all the various pitfalls that we can see. But, for example, we filed in the Texas case to make clear that the Texas case that the Trump administration has filed the other way, to make clear that New Jersey stands behind this and is fighting for the Affordable Care Act. And you know, I filed on behalf of our Medicaid program. Like, we are standing up and fighting back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ken Feistel. I'm from Monmouth County, New Jersey, and I am Suboxone waived.
Great.
And I've been treating addiction medicine for over 35 years through affiliations with both New Hope Foundation and Turning Point. I appreciate your comment about all hands on deck. Unfortunately, our hands are tied as they're on deck. You know, the combination of federal regulations and state regulations isolate a large population of people who can treat these people. The model of integrating primary care and mental health in an office setting is the need. Okay? Unfortunately, the reimbursement process and the legal process don't allow it, and particularly in Medicaid, where billing for the same service on the same day is not possible. The other issue is we need to get the message out to people that methadone and buprenorphine are not just substituting one drug for another. That is the standard of care in this field. And I would disagree with my colleagues that because you're a board-certified family physician, you're either capable or knowledgeable about utilizing those drugs in this population. For the first time, we have tools in addiction medicine. We have Vivitrol. We have isolated different preparations of buprenorphine therapies to eliminate some of the diversion. One of the things that you can do in your position is to regulate the fact that someone who goes into a detox program and a rehab program doesn't come out the day after they get Suboxone. Because what happens is they're now immune to the tolerance of the drug. They go out, they use, and ultimately they die. Okay? The other issue is they should all be given, and family members be given Narcan, or at least the directions how to use Narcan to eliminate that problem. One of the ways you can save some costs is as these new Medicaid providers be licensed in the state to work through this population, eliminate some of the prior authorizations that are necessary. I don't know where you live in Cape May, but I drove from Manalapan, New Jersey to Cape May on hold with United Healthcare trying to get approval for a patient who I saw in the office, had him isolated from his opioids, and had him ready for Suboxone. And it took 4 days to get the drug. And so that's a problem. The other issue is that the judicial system, through drug courts, take these people and they get a positive drug test because somebody has relapsed. They force those people into inpatient treatment programs, which is a waste of money. Many of these people can be taken care of in an outpatient program where we now have the capability to utilize these drugs. They don't have to stay for 28 days. I mean, the 28-day program was really what insurance paid for in the 50s, and that's how the issue of 28-day programs came in place. And mandate some of these programs to make sure that these people are provided with the behavioral science background necessary to maintain them in recovery. And I agree with your issues about recovery coaches and case coordination and the ability for these people to have an opportunity to live a life where there's housing available, sober living is available, and opportunities for employment.
Can I ask you a brief follow-up question? How did you start providing these services?
How did I get involved in addiction services? When I first went into practice, by the way, I was born, raised, and stayed in New Jersey, did all my training here. And so I got involved initially in addiction medicine because one of my partner's wife was an alcoholic, and I began to take care of her. Subsequently, I got involved in addiction medicine because my wife and I adopted 2 children, both born of addicted mother, the same mother, but different fathers, from Texas. And so I remember the night that I withdrew my oldest son in bed, sitting next to us with paregoric drops. And I made a long time made a goal that I'd never have another child born of an addicted mother. I won't live long enough to see that happen.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your comments and for sharing that.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sandy Selzer. I'm not a family physician. I'm a staff member at NJAFP. I have the vest to prove it with the logo. I have a question. I'm going to get to my question. I have a little background in case you don't know. So part of the member benefit of NJAFP is I have a team of coaches, practice coaches that go into practices. We secure grant funding, state and federal grant funding to go into practices and help them with practice improvement, process improvement. My question is about DPP. We have a state grant. We're working with the Department of Health on a state grant to help practices improve their referral process to DPP and DSME, which are both great programs. What we're finding is, and I know you're considering expanding it, which I think is great, but building it doesn't mean that they will come. And what we have found in the process is, one, the physicians, many physicians don't even know what DPP programs are in their area, so the DPP programs need to, diabetes prevention program, they need to do a better job of reaching out to the community of physicians where they have a program. I think their marketing is a little weak. The other is when we're trying to help the physicians create that process to do that referral, especially in Medicaid, and I have an example of a clinic down here in Galloway. So her patients are in Galloway. There are clinics in Cape May Regional. Her patients can't get there, so it's great to refer them, but if they don't have transportation, they're not going to go. I'm not sure how Medicaid reimburses for that in terms of the patients, but the physicians need education on that because they're now putting this extra process in. It's a great expansion of their practice, but the logistics of doing it causes a lot of work. So we need to tighten that up, and we'd love to help you do that. But
well,
again,
I'd love to just make sure we take your information to follow up, just because this is so it would be a new Medicaid benefit, which means we're sort of thinking through what all of those issues are as we stand this up and put it in place. Hopefully, having that kind of structure being sort of baked into the benefit system will create more opportunities for those programs to make themselves known in communities. But we'd love to talk to you about what you've seen as we think through the implementation issues, because it's important that we don't just do this on paper, that it really works for people.
I think that they're probably underutilized at this point, and they don't need to be. They shouldn't be.
Right.
And
but that's partly why we want to pay for it. Like that's partly why we want to put it in the benefit package, so that that's not a barrier. There may be many other barriers, but so that's not a barrier.
Yes, exactly. And just one parting thought. The obesity in children is on the rise. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes on the rise. Right now, I believe that DPP is 18 and over. I would just highly recommend lowering that age. There are a lot of 13, 14-year-old kids who need it, who could really benefit from it earlier. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lauren Carruth, President-elect. So we talk a lot about treatment, which is obviously very important and crucial. I think we also need to spend as much time talking about prevention.
Yeah.
In my experience, there's a social stigma with treating anxiety and depression with SSRIs and other antidepressants, and a social stigma of going to a therapist, but it seems to be socially acceptable to pop a Xanax, to drink some wine. We need to change that. So when those are barriers, the other barriers, when I have someone in my office who's very depressed and anxious, it's a lot of time that I take to counsel them, and I take it because getting them in to see a therapist, if I can talk them into it, is almost impossible, because you have someone who's very depressed, very anxious, has no interest or energy, and they have to call 6 different places. I give them recommendations. I tell them to call their insurance company. They call the names on the insurance company. Nobody takes it. And I'm talking just therapists. I can manage the medication, at least initially, and for most cases, almost all of them, but they need that therapist to have, and it's been mentioned before, to have a therapist or social workers embedded in offices where they trust me. So if I say, here, talk to this person, oh, they're right here, they have time for you, getting them in initially, I find that when my patients are able to do that and come back, they're already better because the medicine hasn't kicked in yet. So having that access is really important, and I think there needs to be a big push on prevention so we don't have to keep fighting this, and increasing awareness in the population about just trying to drown our sorrows isn't going to be the answer. We need help, but we need to help them help themselves.
I think you make a great point about prevention. I mean, a real public health strategy is how we combat these issues. We recently did a panel together that was Department of Health and us at the Department of Human Services, Children and Families, and the Department of Correction. And it always strikes me that we have these other systems because we haven't been able to get in front of these prevention issues. And so we have far too many kids in care or threat of being in state care, far too many people in corrections because we haven't been able to solve the issue when it first emerges. And so I take your point, and I think there's lots to do. I will say, I mean, I'd be curious what you've seen. I think we have a lot of work to do on what, in particular, substance use disorder prevention looks like in a clinical setting. I think that there's some research. We've done some work here in New Jersey on ESPERT and the like, but I think we have more work to do to make sure that we have the best evidence-based strategies there. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, Tom Shaffrey, past president, but I'm also one of 6 past presidents of the organization that no longer practices in New Jersey. So that goes along with the fact that we lose physicians. Great, I love the ideas, but many of us are a little jaded. We've heard many things before. My year as president, and it didn't matter in terms of political party, okay? We were held in a very negative light. I went to meet with my own state legislators, all Republicans. One didn't even bother to show up, and the 2 very unapologetically escorted me out of the office because what I was saying didn't match what they thought. I was just there as a money-hungry physician, which was stated explicitly, in trying to point out the fact that primary care in New Jersey is suffering. But I've also had the same comments from a Democratic legislator. Okay, so you folks have a really tough job. I did notice on the committee of Governor Murphy, there really wasn't any member of the New Jersey Academy of Family Physicians on that committee. So I think what you're looking at, you're at a deficit. You really don't know how bad this state is. We are 51 out of the 50 states in the District of Columbia as a desirable location to be a primary care physician. You're at the bottom of the hole looking up, and it's going to take some really dramatic legislation and pushing and manipulating the legislators to say, hey, we've got to turn this around. This is the group you need to be talking to every single day as to what needs to be done to improve healthcare in this state. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to swirl and go down the drain.
Great. Well, I am happy to be here. I hope this is the first of many conversations. I'm very interested in your ideas and the kinds of things that you are putting forward with the legislator. And I think that we have I don't disagree that we have a lot of work to do together.
And not just the state, the federal level. I was also been a congressional key contact for 12 years, and getting members from both parties in D.C. to pay attention to this has been impossible. Again, my congressman, a Republican, just dismissed the need for improving primary care in New Jersey for years.
So I will tell you, we tried for several years in the Obama administration to restructure federal GME investments to prioritize primary care, and we couldn't convince the Congress to do it. So I understand the gap and the issues, and I really do look forward to working together so that we can find solutions here in New Jersey.
I would ask, if you're going to do it, the people on the dais with you are the people to be asking.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for the invitation and for the great conversation. There was a lot to take away from this for us as we sort of chart a course for the years ahead. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Johnson. I think we've had our questions answered, and we've apprised of Ms. Johnson of our willingness to work together and to try to get a lot of these issues resolved.